Okay, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Moving on to part two of the aviation program this afternoon for the 2017 World Travel Market. Now, I mentioned in the presentation just now about changing business models. I talked briefly about long-haul low cost. Now, some of you will know and some of you will not know about a very novel airline, a very different business model that's just come on the scene in the last few years. I don't think we've ever interviewed anybody from the team before here at WTM. The airline is WOW. You can't miss it if you're at an airport with this purple livery, and you can't miss the CEO, and he's going to join us now on the stage. So, Scully Mogensen, CEO and founder of WOW. Nice round of applause. Scully, welcome to WTM.
Thanks, John.
I was saying to you earlier on, I'm glad you made it, because you're an Icelandic guy, you have an Icelandic-based airline, and there was 90-mile-an-hour winds in Iceland yesterday.
That's right.
Somehow you managed to make it on time. How did you do that?
We're always on time.
That's a good answer, Scully. Good start. Now, tell us, many people may not know you as an individual. You are not from the airline business. I think your upbringing or your career history has been in tech, IT, and you've moved from there into aviation. Tell us about that background, and then tell us why on earth you moved out of seemingly something so lucrative into the airline business.
Well, I actually like to challenge my team and ask ourselves, are we an airline or are we a technology business? Because I do think that technology is providing now a platform for the first time for the airline industry where we can truly move ahead, whether it's towards customer service, how you enter new markets, how you organize yourself. And our goal is to be the first airline in the world where ancillary revenue surpass the per seat revenue, if you like. And the way to achieve that is all about technology.
So, but what made you leave? Were you not one of these geeks who just liked technology? Could you not have gone on there and invented new, I don't know, iPhones or apps or whatever, just had a happy life?
Well, brand new Airbus 330-900 Neo is a hell of a lot larger than an iPhone, and a lot more technology. So I think, again, I'm still in the technology industry. We love what we're doing. We're having a lot of fun.
But I mean, in all seriousness, I mean, what made you? What happened one day when you got the idea, or how did you come to get the idea to see there could be a space for something that you could do in the airline business?
So I was in technology for the last 20, 25 years, technology and telecom, traveling half of my time. And I was always surprised by, again, lack of innovation. They all pretty much looked the same. They all felt the same. Not talking about the airlines in general. To their credit, I think a lot of airlines are now moving in the right direction. You know, change and innovation is happening fairly rapidly. But at that time, it was clear to me that we could do better. And in particular, in my home country, Iceland, there was one airline who had essentially a monopoly, very much a legacy carrier, having done many good things, but nonetheless, to me, it was obvious that there was an opportunity to bring in a low-cost airline, but not only towards Iceland, but also to create a long-haul low-cost airline, which is what we have done. And again, technology being the key in making that happen.
Now, you said it's a long-haul, low-cost airline. I've been talking about that just a few minutes ago as a flavour of the month. It's on everybody's lips. This is the airline business model of now and the future. Would you call WOW a low-cost airline? Because there are some differences, I think, from what you do and some of the others which we'll talk about.
Well, I think, again, if you do a long-haul flight, there are certain considerations that I think are very important. So we have never, for example, packed as many seats as we possibly could onto our aircraft. In fact, our pitch is quite good. So there are definitely, again, issues where we differentiate ourselves from what you would maybe normally call a low-cost carrier. Another item which we copied from Spirit, they actually have a big seat. So Spirit is very much an ultra-low-cost airline in North America, but they do have a big seat up front. And it's not a different class. It is precisely what I'm saying. It's a big seat. You pay extra for it. And it's extremely popular. So we adopted that onto our longer haul flights, our 330s. It's been doing very well. So I think you'll see more of that. So there are a number of things where you, I think, need to have sort of a trial and error. You can try things out. And eventually, I think you hopefully get smarter and better.
Just teasing out a bit more about the origins. I mean, you set up the airline, founded it in 2011, began flying in 2012, and slightly joking but slightly serious, you managed to amass a certain amount of funding from selling some of what you had done in the tech sector. So it gave you I don't know if you call it seed corn, but you had the means to begin, the airline. You had observed, as you were saying, there was an opportunity, you saw the space, but you're not from this industry. So did you look to some people in the industry in some of the technical aspects of how did you go about buying a fleet, or how did you really know where you should fly? How did you assemble the initial decisions about network and so on?
Well, actually, so because I've started many businesses in the technology industry, and I remember very clearly when I started talking to people about, whether to start an airline or not, even people that had been very successful with me in the past, they didn't want to touch it with a stick, so I was sort of forced to fund it myself, and luckily so now, so it's still my sole problem or opportunity, depending on who you ask. But the same held true. I think later on, when we then finally started, normally you start a business and you always get a lot of congratulations. We only got condolences on that day one. So I think something part of the culture has always been, and my favorite quote is, "Impossible is just an opinion." And what we have learned when we started talking to a number of people in Iceland, they would constantly say, "You can't do this, you can't do that. You have to have sales offices. You cannot go here or there." And more, and I actually heard that Stelios, the early days of EasyJet, he started hiring a lot of people with airline industry expertise. Eventually, he stopped doing that altogether because he found that they were all trying to mold him into something that he didn't want to be. And I think the same has held true with WOW. The first couple of years, we were trying to listen to all the experts, and we were not really doing what we wanted to do, or what my vision was. So I think now we have been much more hiring people from the internet community. We are not looking, obviously, with the pilots and crew members, and there are some expert roles within the company, but when it comes to sales and marketing, technology, we do completely things on our own terms.
Well, that's the point I definitely want to come back to. But in terms of the actual network, I mean, your Iceland is your base.
Yep.
And I guess you could say Iceland is, through geology, nicely placed, midway between the US and Europe, and that's something that Iceland Air had used. You have used that. In that sense, you're conventional that you've used the benefit of geography. But tell us, how have you made that different to that other airline that you mentioned?
So I think that there's a fundamental shift going on now in the transatlantic market with the newer narrow bodies, whether it's the 321 from Airbus or the MAX, where you can now fly directly from Europe to the East Coast. As a result, with smaller, more efficient aircraft. As a result, you have a lot more competition coming into the market. You have newer routes, smaller cities becoming valid destinations. So I think that's going to get very crowded. As a result, going into next year, you will see a number of new destinations from us, a little bit further inland, a little bit further east and west. So we have now announced Cleveland, Cincinnati, St. Louis, Detroit, Dallas, on the European side, or sort of further east. We just added Tel Aviv, doing very well. So I think what we will need to do, we will continue to expand our network, again, further west and east. We already have LA, San Francisco on the west coast, but it's also no secret. We're taking into our fleet 4 brand new 330 NEOs end of next year. With them, we can fly pretty much anywhere in Asia as of end of next year. And so that's what we plan on doing. And as a result, we can mission Iceland actually becoming a major hub for not only transatlantic, but also copying a little bit what Finnair has done very successfully in connecting Asia with Europe. I think we can connect Asia with Eastern North America.
But just looking at that in a bit more detail, the North Atlantic market, or the US market, you mentioned about coming more inland, and now I come from that legacy thinking background. So when you announced Dallas, I think, how on earth are you going to make that work? Nobody goes to Dallas unless they're going to Dallas, or they work on a connection with American Airlines to go somewhere else. Are you going to really be confident that in somewhere like that you're going to get enough people to fill that plane without that traditional model of people flying on somewhere else?
So I think one of the things that makes me the most proud is when I'm traveling on board our aircraft and people come up to me and say, essentially, thank you for enabling us to now visit our distant relatives or my brother or my son at college or whatever the reason might be. But when we bring $99 fares for transatlantic travel, we open up and expand the market far beyond what I think the traditional textbook has told us was possible. And that's what we have been doing, and it's based on that we now feel confident that we can enter pretty much any market with extremely low bare-bone fares. But again, also, I'm very excited. Next year, we're upgrading our entire technology platform. We will probably go north of $60 per pax on ancillary revenue. We're already at $53 per pax, which I think is the world record. So again, with a different model than many of our traditional competitors, we can be a lot more flexible and aggressive in pricing.
And that can drive the volume. So again, I want to come back to this as a separate point, but driving the volume of people on seats. Yeah. So the biggest share of the revenue, as you're saying, is actually not the ticket, but many other things.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, the US market is one, but it's also pretty crowded, and there are other low-cost airlines. You fly passengers unless people are going to and from Iceland. Then you're offering a connection from a US point via Iceland to Europe or vice versa. Do you have any alarm at other low-cost carriers, be it Norwegian, who is getting bigger and bigger, or even Level within IAG, who's opening up some US routes? Do you think they might take some of your breakfast from you, or do you think you're just going to grow the market more, that there's room for all of you?
As long as I keep the lunch and the dinner, they can have my breakfast.
Good answer.
No, I think, again, clearly it's a very competitive industry. That's what makes it fun. Mm-hmm. We fully anticipate the competition will only get harder. But that's why, again, by adding Asia into our mix, it will further strengthen our destinations and the network as a whole. So that's one of the things we learned, and it's essentially a technology term. The network effects grow stronger by each and every point. The same holds true for a carrier's network. So I think we're now finally at a stage where our network makes sense. So as of next year, we essentially have 50% of our destinations in the European side, 50% in the US side, versus last year, or this year, it was 65-35, so which obviously was skewed. So we feel very good about where we are and where we're going.
And coming back to the model itself, I just had a little skim on TripAdvisor the other day, and just got two comments. Good and not so good, to see how people perceive the WOW model. Somebody said, these are recent comments in the past few days, somebody said, was a pleasant trip, got to where I needed to go for a great price. So really that's confirming what you're saying is your strategy. Yep. The other one said, the flights are cheap, however they scam you with the baggage fees. Now, are you really focusing on the low price, but to get those very high ancillaries that you talked about, $53, $60, is there a kind of an aggression that people have forced into buying these other things, or would you argue it's a real choice? You can either go bare minimum, or you could choose these other elements.
So we've always had a principle: you should never surprise your passengers. So you go on our website, and our pricing strategy, our structure is extremely clear. It's upfront. You go through the process as you book the ticket. So I don't think anyone can really be surprised to see these charges. As a result, again, it's entirely up to you. We like to think that we are competitive and the cheapest option, even if you choose to travel with a carry-on and a check-in bag. So, I think that's the key here.
And you mentioned about the onboard service. I don't know if you were here when I was just doing the previous presentation. I talked about long-haul low cost and the challenge between having, as you described, a large number of seats so you can get the lowest cost per seat and get as many people on board, or having a kind of premium service. In some ways I was surprised, what you were saying, that you don't have not a business class, you don't have a premium seat, you have a bigger seat. Is that something you'd review? Do you get comments from people who would like to have a bit more, maybe a lie flat bed, they'll pay for it, or to have a meal included, or do you think this big seat is enough to meet your needs and give you some differentiation in revenue?
I do think there's an opportunity to do a lot better towards the business traveler or frequent traveler. And that's a market that I think we are very interested in. We already see, I like to say that our customer base, when people ask me what kind of passengers do you get on board, wow. These are smart travelers, well-informed travelers, and people who are spending their own money. If you're spending other people's money, God bless, you can go and buy a transatlantic ticket for $5,000. But we like to think, okay, if it's my money, I would rather pay, $100 or $200. So, but having said that, clearly there is a segment that has a greater demand for certain services, be it a bigger seat or something else. And I think up to a certain point, it makes sense for us to serve that market. But it would be, again, on a more smart way to do it rather than to mimicking the current business class, if you like.
So you're always thinking of a different way to do things, not just to accept the given wisdom.
Yeah, I'm the guinea pig here. I've traveled so much, and for me, it's efficiency. It's to be on time. It's essentially not about fancy bells and whistles. In fact, I want to get in my seat. I want to have a quiet time and rest and tune off. So now I don't represent everyone again, but I do think there's a large number of travelers who really focus on the speed, the efficiency, the on time, brand new aircraft, and that's plenty.
And I mean, we hear a lot about millennials using this type of service, and people who are in that age group are willing to do whatever it takes just to get a low price. They'll pack less or not take bags, and they're not bothered about anything else. Is that your primary customer segment, would you say? And is it one you see that can support your growth, or are you looking for other parts of the market as well?
So again, I do think that we get well-informed travelers. So most people today will spend a significant amount of time doing the research before traveling. And clearly, again, as you were quoting from TripAdvisor and other, people are smart. They will find what other people are saying about you. So we have to provide a good service. It's not enough to only have a cheap ticket. You need to be doing a good job as well. And so we're very centered around that, and we want to be open again and honest about that. We make mistakes. The weather in Iceland yesterday was horrible. Okay, we have to deal with that and try to do our best to deal with that. But obviously that's outside of our control. So again, I don't think that, I would not want to categorize our customers as the millennials only. Absolutely not. On the contrary, we do see the number of passengers and the spectrum of our passengers is quite broad.
And another element of this, a surprise that you don't have any in-flight entertainment as such. Now, I know people are bringing more their own devices, but what I'm thinking of there is, again, is that not, at least in some way, a lost revenue opportunity for you by not having something that you can download or plug in, or a basic choice of, paid-for films or videos or whatever?
I don't think the in-flight entertainment system is a moneymaker for anyone. If you take the cost of the installation, the weight, and everything else, and again, the fact that half of all bookings in certain regions now go through mobile or iPads or smart tablets. So most of the passengers do have their own entertainment. Again, we're upfront about it on our website. We encourage people to do it. We do have, and we have experimented with providing iPads on board. So we are looking at things like that. But you will not see an in-flight entertainment system in our flights.
That's great, that's clear. And in terms of, again, looking back at the business model, you're based in Iceland. How much is Iceland itself important to you as a destination? And you know that I work with the airport guys in Iceland, so I know there's different markets. There's the outbound market, tourism coming in, and transfer. But tourism really has blossomed in Iceland in recent years. Is that something that you're going to be an active part of further development, or is it an incidental compared to this big transatlantic flow for you?
No, I think it's a hugely important market to us. It is our home market. It's where we're based. It's where most of our people are. So Iceland will continue to be a very important and play an important role. But I do think it's important for us to distinguish between Iceland as a global hub opportunity versus Iceland as a destination. And the airport needs to distinguish between the two, the political environment needs to distinguish between the two, and us as an airline need to understand that these are two very different opportunities. Both are interesting, we are pursuing both. But I think if you look at Iceland's geographical location, it is actually amazing to see the competitive advantage we have as such. And I don't see anyone being able to compete on that basis. You can't replicate our location. So just physically, geographically, there is plenty of room for growth going forward, and again, connecting Asia, North America, and Europe.
Now, you mentioned Asia and you mentioned Israel. Why Israel right now? Because that's in isolation. You've got transatlantic, you've got more or less Western, Southern Europe. How did Israel come on the map?
Well, essentially, so we looked at so we're now taking on board the 321 Neo. And so it's a 7.5-hour flight from Reykjavik, and the Neo is smack on for that route. And so the arrival of the narrow-body aircraft allowing you to pursue new destinations that previously you either had to do a wide-body or a much larger aircraft to reach. So again, we decided to test it. It's a very interesting destination. There's a lot of transatlantic travel between Israel, obviously, and North America. And again, so far, so good.
And more widely, Asia. I mean, everything says that this is a market that's going to grow, whether it is China, Korea, many other countries in Asia, growing middle classes, India, and so on. But might it be a more difficult one to get into, where you could perhaps find that consumers in those markets have a desire to travel, that they have more conventional, traditional, you could even say protectionist views about letting airlines get in? Have you been testing the water there to see how those political landscapes lie in terms of getting into these markets?
Yeah, I think you're raising a good point. I think the political environment, unfortunately, that we live in today poses certain risks when it comes to opening up new routes. Something that might be open today but will be closed tomorrow, or someone changing the rules after the start of the game, so to speak. So clearly that's something we need to be careful about. I think again the good news is that Iceland is a very small country, very friendly country. We don't have an army. Our policemen do not carry guns. We like to think that we're friendly with everybody. So I think politically we have opportunity from that point of view to genuinely be friendly with pretty much everyone. And I think that's also an attitude we like to take to our airline, to WOW. We welcome everyone on board. And but yes, it is something that you need to be very careful about. But another thing, of course, nature of the hub, now that we have so many destinations across North America and Europe, we can allow ourselves to test some not so obvious Asian destinations maybe, and see how it goes.
And where would you see those customers?
To pursue, and we might change it 6 months later. You know, just again the speed, the flexibility of how you strategically build out your network, how you can test things out, move aircraft around, has become a lot more fluid than in the past. And again, I think that's a very important part of our strategy, certainly.
And is the technology helping you to assess market potential as well? Because I know airlines would tend to, they always look backwards. They look at what did fly and what data was available. Are you able, to, with your knowledge, able to tap in more into the present and the future? Now, what I'm thinking about is social media, because I'm hearing things which I find fascinating about looking at people's intent to travel by chat on social media or Facebook pages or whatever. Are you finding that already is giving you new information that wasn't available before?
Absolutely. And again, big data, not only in the airline industry, but in every industry, and how you listen in, so to speak, how you can even feed the market with bits and pieces of information. You can track exactly how much views it gets, how many comments it gets, how much sort of noise it creates in the marketplace. So I think monitoring the online dialogue, if you like, is hugely important and something we do very actively.
And I guess that helps in marketing too, because I know when you began flying to the US, you got traction seemingly very quickly, which it took me aback to think, literally to say, wow, the volume is there. And again, that must be a lot due to the use of social media. As someone who wasn't, an airline that wasn't known in the US, and yet to be filling planes with US citizens.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, we're very grateful for the reception we have received, and it would have been impossible for us to do what we're doing only a few years back. And to have a relatively small but very good team sitting in Iceland, we have no regional offices, being able again to enter markets like LA, San Francisco, Miami, now Dallas, and again with very little marketing spend, if you like, and I think our per passenger spend is probably one of the lowest in the world from what I can tell and what I can see, but still very effective, because traditional media, traditional marketing budgets, traditional ways of thinking are, I think, outdated to a large extent.
Now, you mentioned about the fleet plays an important role. You've got very advanced aircraft. You've got the 320, 321 Neo already. Are they working well? Because one of the versions has had a number of significant engine challenges. You have the other engine?
Yeah.
Okay. Shiny new planes are efficient, maybe for some people sexy, but they're expensive too. How does that stack up financially? Where is the company now with a big fleet order book coming through, growing? Are you making money? Are you where you want to be financially? And are you comfortable about that in an industry that's known for its corpses of failed airlines?
Yeah, no, definitely. Sort of if I put my investor hat on, I think WOW has far exceeded anybody's expectations. We have been profitable since 2015, far sooner than anyone thought. I think we have grown far more than anyone expected. We've been very fortunate having a great relationship with Airbus and some of the largest lessors in our industry. And without them, we wouldn't be where we are. And I think we have built a trusted relationship and a trusted dialogue where we share with them our plans and what we intend to do and what we are doing. So I think from that perspective, things have been going according to plan or even better than planned. Now, of course, there are ups and downs. We're not hedged on fuel. Fuel is up now, but again, that's where brand new planes come in and help you. I think in a low interest rate environment, the only way to go is to have brand new aircrafts, because you can finance them much cheaper, and just again the fuel savings and the efficiency savings more than pay for the newer aircrafts. So again, we're very fortunate when it comes to our industry partners, and we couldn't be happier with Airbus.
Now, I think you have been quoted recently, I saw in the financial press, saying that you would be interested or looking maybe in partnerships, one in terms of costs and negotiating power for fleet, maybe partnership in terms of network development. Can you elaborate as much as you're willing to on that point?
Well, it was sort of like we were talking about our marketing strategy. You have to throw something out in the cosmos and see what the buzz creates. But the same there. We have had now for the last few years a number of interesting parties talking to us. And maybe what I've said recently is that we're now coming to a size where all the numbers are getting a lot bigger. And in order to continue our growth and our expansion, and I think we can double in size again in the next 2 years or so, from 3 million passengers this year to 6 by 2019, 2020. And in order to do so, we need, again, to open up new routes. We need to get on board additional aircraft. To find a partner that can help us achieve that strategically, rather than just a financial partner, could make a lot of sense. But that's not an objective in itself. On the contrary, we're having a great time doing what we're doing, and I like to continue that.
So if it's not just a financial partner, what do you mean? You mean like a collaboration of some kind, a marketing partnership, or becoming part of a wider, say, airline group or something of that kind?
Yeah, I think someone that adds more strategic value than just financial value.
And what about in that growth, in that ambition to double in size with fleet and passengers, would you look completely outside, your origins and your hub in Iceland? Would you set up something parallel? Again, in the past you said you might look at another hub airport, or you might fly, say, direct from a European city to the US or indeed to Asia. Is that still something you're considering?
Absolutely, but I think we also woke up with the reality that we are growing extremely fast organically from our Iceland base. So this year over year, we're growing north of 70%. Next year, we anticipate to grow north of 40%, obviously from a larger base. So next year will be about 4 million passengers. And so with that kind of growth and the growing pains, if you like, that we have been experiencing, which are inevitable and I think are quite normal, when, again, you're hiring hundreds of people. Currently we're about 1,200. I think next year will be about 1,800. So, of course, to train, to hire, to not lose sight of the efficiencies and everything else, we have plenty on our plate in the next 2 years. Once we are fully up to speed from the technology side, fully up to speed with the ancillary revenue vision that we want to implement, I do see an opportunity to go beyond and outside of Iceland, but right now we're just very focused on executing the current plan.
Okay. Could it get too big for you personally? I mean, could you end up having to stand aside? I mean, I'm just thinking, disruption, and Uber, the guy who founded it he's out.
Right.
Stelios that you mentioned, I mean, Stelios is still very involved in EasyJet, but he has said he's a serial entrepreneur. Maybe you'd call yourself the same. He gets bored. Right. He was interested in EasyJet when he had 4 planes, but after that, well, it's just the same old, and he wants to invest his entrepreneurial money in something different. Is that you, or is this something that is, at the moment, at least more dear to your heart, that you want to be fully involved in still?
Well, one very important difference is I'm only dealing with one shareholder, which is myself. So, but I've said, as long as I'm having as much fun as I am, and as long as we're continuing opening new markets, again, Asia for me is a huge opportunity. I'm super excited about it. I'm extremely excited about the technology platform that we're building. I think there's massive opportunity there. And I'm spending more and more of my time going in there. I just hired a brilliant COO who's helping me managing the day-to-day operations. So, no, I don't see any fundamental change anytime soon, but who knows?
Scotty, let's see if anyone from the audience, ladies and gentlemen, would like to ask you a question directly. If you've got a question, gentleman on the front, we're just going to get a microphone to you. Anyone else, just put your hand up. We've got a gentleman over the back there.
Yes, my question, especially being from Iceland and with a very, very historical Icelandic background, do you have any plans to service the under capacity needed Umrah and Hajj market?
I'm sorry, which market?
It's the Umrah and Hajj market. So it's the
you have a guy in Iceland's been doing it for years.
Pilgrimages to Mecca, which a lot of airlines get into. So Iceland has done it as charters.
Yeah, and was also done as the fellow from Iceland that did his own airline only doing that.
Okay.
From Iceland.
Right. No, it's not something we have looked at. Doesn't mean we would never do it, but it's not on anytime in the near future, at least.
Okay, next question, just the Gentleman back in the gods up there. I know who it is. We'll just get a mic to you, David.
Hi, Scully. Thanks. Very interesting. Just curious, with all the changes in Brexit and all that, any thoughts? A lot of your traffic seems to come from the UK. Where do you think, what's your view of what's going to happen a year from now and how that might impact your plans?
So I would be shocked if the UK doesn't find a way to ensure that the continuity of the London area as a major global hub. I mean, it would simply be devastating on so many fronts, not only for the travel industry or the airline industry, if they would fail to do so. So now I'm an eternal optimist. I'm sure there's going to be all kinds of games played in between and it will be a last minute thing, but I cannot envision London not continue to play a central role in regardless of politics, because that would simply be unthinkable and to see that change overnight.
More questions for Scully at all from the audience? Yeah, gentleman over here, Simon.
Good afternoon, Simon Calder from The Independent. I wonder, you've done remarkable things in aviation. What advice would you give to our next speaker, Mr. Alex Cruz of British Airways?
Stolen my last question, Simon.
Well, I have huge respect for Alex and what he did at Vueling, and I am sure that he's bringing a lot of hard-earned lessons from Vueling now into BA. Probably needed lessons. So I have nothing but admiration, and this is not just me saying so because he's coming here next. On the contrary, I think anyone who has gone through the Vueling school and is now sitting as head of BA must be doing something right.
Gentleman over here to the far left.
Thank you. Scully, if you look at Norwegian, they've built up their own leasing business. It's almost like kind of a standalone operation. Is that something that you might be interested in doing to kind of diversify your business?
No, I don't think Björn is doing a leasing business because he wanted to. I think he did so because he's all of a sudden having 200 aircraft that he has to find something to do. So I would want to keep WOW very much focusing on the core business and letting the leasing guys run the leasing business.
Any other questions yet? Gentleman back there.
Hello, you said you are running your marketing activities from your base and you don't have regional teams. So how you do your business where English is not the mother tongue? Or how you would do your business in Asia, for example? Would you hire regional teams?
So that's a good question, and yes, now that we are opening up Asia, we are for the first time contemplating setting up a local office, partially for the reasons that you are mentioning. I do think, well, also because I think it's a massive opportunity that deserves and requires maybe a more focused team on the ground. But that would then not be teams all over Asia. It would be one sort of office. But there's also it's not only from a marketing point of view, it's also from a regulatory, environmental point of view. So absolutely fair point.
Any other takers for questions? Yeah, we just touched on the UK market, Scully, but we've seen here consolidation recently. We've seen Monarch, a very long and well-respected airline, go out of business, and not UK, but we've seen Air Berlin, of course, disappearing in recent weeks too. Particularly in the case of Monarch and your activity in the UK, do you see opportunities there? Would you be interested to try to acquire slots, for example, at Gatwick, where you've got a big operation?
Yes, absolutely. I think we just announced Stansted as our new London destination, so we would love to continue to grow in Gatwick as well. So if you know how we can get our hands on those slots, please let me know.
I think it's a question of how much you're willing to spend compared to the other bids that might come in.
Maybe we should have that conversation offline.
Yeah, it's not me who's deciding, I can assure you that. I mean, and why Stansted? I mean, obviously, London's a big market. Is it just that you see a different part of a London market to tap into there?
To be honest, partially, again, because Gatwick was completely full. We didn't get the slots, we couldn't get the slots that we wanted or needed in order to fit them into our network. We could get them, or we did get them at Stansted. So, and it is, again, the London greater area is a huge market, so from that point of view, I think it's an interesting opportunity, and it's too early to tell, but I think it could do very well as well.
And I mean, how do you see the London market overall? I mean, I can think in the last 10 years that market's gone from having one and sometimes two airlines to having numerous players, and I think Gatwick's now got 5 or 6 airlines at Gatwick alone. Stansted, I think it's going to be 2 with your services beginning.
Right.
Do you think that is a bubble that will burst for somebody, that somebody will pull capacity out, or do you think it's now long-term sustainable to have so much capacity between Reykjavik and London?
Well, I think the Reykjavik-London route is extremely competitive. It's now, I think, some 85 flights a week, which is crazy. But obviously, in our case, and very importantly, and that's how we can compete with some of these point-to-point competitors, is we are using Iceland again as a hub going into North America, not only competing on the point-to-point. So that's where we differentiate. But I do think that, so again, repeating myself, but competition will only grow.
Mm-hmm. And you're confident you'll be one of the survivors?
Absolutely.
In the process of that. What about the rest of the UK market? I mean, you're in a number of destinations. One I noticed that you've stopped or about to stop is Bristol. What's your view about coming on and off routes?
Well, it stopped because it didn't work.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. And again, we're not going to waste our time on routes that do not work. And we gave it a fair shot. Now, very importantly, it didn't work today. Doesn't mean it doesn't work in 2 years' time or 4 years' time.
Okay.
So, again, unlike some of the legacy carriers, part of the issue could be that we didn't have sufficient connections in North America. Now we're adding a number of new connections. We'll see how those work out. We'll continue to expand in North America. And then maybe we would revisit Bristol at a later date.
Scully, we're just about out of time before your colleague that you mentioned, Alex Cruz, coming on stage in a minute. So thank you very much for giving us your time today. Fascinating story so far, and it's a story which is going to grow. So we look forward to inviting you back in the future to hear about the next step in WOW's development. So Scully Mogensen, CEO and founder of WOW, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, John.
Have a good
My pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.